I've had a lot of questions about the vacuum table on Stinger 1 Camaster. It's the SR24 25 by 49. This is the master file here, and I'm gonna zoom in. You see those circles, dark circles, and they run along 4 different main lines. Those 4 lines are the 3/8 outer diameter PEC PVC tubing. What I do is I mount that underneath the spoil board. I take the bed off and you just flip it over, put the bolts back in, and you cut these grooves that are 3/8 inch wide, and you want to make them about 3.58 inches deep so that the PEC tubing doesn't sit proud. And again, this is all on the back. Now, I have an example over here. If you notice, this does not run all the way through. The reason for that is that in order to put epoxy in the channel where I lay the PEC tubing, which you'll see here, you have to, before you put the tubing in, you have to fill the channel with just enough 2-part epoxy resin and hardener. I use Envirotex because it's the cheapest. You get it at Michael's for, I don't know, they always have huge sales on that stuff. So I do this in the board. There's another way to do it, but I don't want to go off on a tangent. So this runs, so you feed it through. When you're putting the piping in, you use a Forstner bit 3/8. You tap it on the end here, which will be underneath. You'll tap it in there so that you can slide the tubing in. The reason you want to do it that way is you don't want the epoxy pouring out. If you cut all the way through, you got to worry about taping it off here. And the way I plug up these things when I'm putting epoxy is I take a 1/4 inch wooden dowel and I hammer them into the end. And what that does is prevent the epoxy from going into the tubing. So basically you're going to have a tube laid in this channel on the bottom side of your spoil board, and you're going to run epoxy in there, make sure it's airtight. That's the trick. These tubes run underneath, and if you see, there's the groove on the back panel that's removable. You got your 3/8 outer diameter. It's an outer diameter, remember that, PEC tubing that comes out. I had them up here before, but the problem is when I have to do nested projects and tile them, that tubing was getting in the way. So that's why I went underneath and mounted them in the board. It kept everything flush underneath. I use these clamps. This is vinyl tubing for vacuum pressing. These are nylon T-connectors for 3/8 inch vinyl tubing, reinforced vinyl tubing. This is the same tubing you get for vacuum pressing wood, which brings me to why I have this pump. This is a Veneer Supplies. You can find these at joewoodworker.com. That guy has done more research than anybody out there as far as vacuum pressing. The reason I went with this pump is because I talked to the CEO of Vacuum Press Systems when I was looking for air pumps, vacuum pumps. You do not want an oilless pump. You want a continuous run pump. That they're rated to run nonstop for hours and hours and hours, and I've run this thing for 24 hours straight. It gets hot, but it's got great heat dissipation. But it draws 5.5 cubic feet of air per minute, which is what the vacuum press guy advised me to get. He real honest guy too. When he was telling me about his pumps, he said my pumps aren't ideal for what you're trying to do. You're going to want a continuous run pump that will offset any kind of leakage that could go on. His vacuum press systems are for airtight systems, and they have an auto shut off as long as the vacuum is holding it, like say 27 inches of mercury. Vacuum clamping force is measured by inches of mercury. This little 5.5 cubic feet per minute is rated to hold about 29 inches of mercury. That is a ridiculous amount of clamping force. And the reason I have that is because I use vacuum pressing for huge panels and laminated pieces of wood. This thing applies equal pressure across the entire surface area, and the clamping force is pounds per square inch. And I'll show you some, like all this was all laminated in there. Perfect adhesion, perfect pressure all the way through, which is important for large panels. And there's some zebra wood and Paduke under there. So that's why I decided to use this pump. And this pump was about, in case you were curious about price, this pump was about, it was like 570 bucks, but I was looking at Becker pumps and a lot of the rotary vane pumps, oilless pumps that are found on bigger CNCs. But I mean, the cheapest, just to give you an idea, the cheapest Becker pump is about 1,200 bucks. And it doesn't even, what's interesting, it doesn't have the specs of this little beast. I mean, you'd be shocked at how powerful this pump is. So I have two valves. I can shut off and shut on the vacuum table, or I can shut off and shut on the vacuum press bag, so I can run them independently off the same pump. Now, question is, how do you control the vacuum airflow? Well, if you go back here, this was an HDPE table, and HDPE, give you an idea, local supplier, it was 3/4 inch thick. I paid $280 for this sheet. That was a lot of money. Well, it was perfect. I had all these grid lines in here, and if you look at those dots right by that arrow, what those are, these are brass inserts that are tapped into the table. So if you cut 3.5/8 underneath the table, in order to hit those PEX pipes underneath, you have to drill about 3.5/8, and that'll get you into the tubing. You may have to go a little more, but you don't want to go too far in. Then what I do is I do the Easy Lock brass threaded inserts to keep an airtight seal between the PEX piping and the table surface. These are the brass inserts here. Kind of a mishmash of stuff, but there they are. Easy Lock. Yeah, there it is, Easy Lock. And then I just got nylon screws. And the way I open these up is take me a little screwdriver, and all of my templates are zoned and indexed by these 1/8 inch dowel holes, like right here. So I have a master template. I have neck blanks, body blanks, then I have other random parts, but they're all nested in the same area. So once I've set everything up, whatever template I need, I just put it in the right area, and I will unscrew this nylon screw. I used to use brass just in case you hit it with like an Amana bit. Brass will cut. I mean, it'll definitely dull your blade, but I stopped using brass screws because brass doesn't give you an airtight seal. So there's the air port, and I've got 4, 8, 12, and I spaced them so that they accommodate all the different templates. If you need to, I just keep the screws in all the time, nylon, and when you tighten these down, the nylon grabs on the inside of those threaded inserts and keeps the air flow airtight. Let me see here. Yeah, and I've had great success with this. Now, the reason I went with this new bed is because I learned the hard way that no matter how, you're gonna have a mistake. Eventually you're gonna cut into your spoil board. Well, guess what? HDPE is impossible to patch up. There's no way to patch it up. I never thought about that. What I can tell you is this is completely non-porous and holds perfect vacuum. These are the gaskets channels for the 1/4 inch Pearson work holding gasket. The Pearson work holding gasket is this stuff. It's the best price I can find, and it is superior to anything else price-wise, and their shipping is very reasonable. You're gonna find out from some of these suppliers that the gasketing tape, I mean, you'll end up paying more for shipping than for the tape. An example is, I bought this, where is it? this 150 feet of this stuff. That's 1/16 low profile tape. It costs more to ship it than the stuff was worth. But this gasket compresses and does an excellent job. You just have to cut your gasket channels properly. And you will get airtight. I mean, nothing is gonna move. I mean, when the vacuum's on, I can put a neck blank on here and the entire table shakes. There is no way you can pull it off. And since I deal with odd shapes, clamping's out of the question. Double-sided tape doesn't work all the time because sometimes the boards or the wood or the blanks that I'm working on, you know, I'm doing some pretty deep cuts sometimes, and the inertia and the torque from the spindle, eventually it just gets things moving, wobbling around. So vacuum is the only option I had. So that's why I have all these templates over here. And if you'll notice, say, here's a neck blank template. It's got the air, port in there so air can flow underneath your piece. That's just a 1/4 inch or 3/16 inch bit with like a 1/32 depth of cut, no, 1/16 depth of cut. Then the gasket channel, and these are all indexed. So these are my typical neck blanks. I had to figure out what's the maximum piece of dimension of the wood for body blanks and neck blanks. For me, for neck blanks, it was 44 inches, 3-inch wide and 3-inch tall. And this is the jig I use. I have a couple videos that I'll try and post. I hope I'm explaining this properly, but so yeah, you turn this on, plug it in, put your piece on your jig. Just imagine that this thing's indexed here. This is part of that old neck blank. I had it zoned for smaller pieces too, so I could put a small piece here, you know, small piece here. But again, the HDP is impossible to patch. Nothing will stick to it. No adhesive will stick to it. That brings me to the epoxy bed. The reason I went with epoxy is because I can get Envirotex. I just get a gallon of it, but I use it for a whole lot of other stuff as well, for plaques and everything, to give it a real nice glassy finish. But if you see here, I just cut an 1/8 inch recess into the spoil board, about an 1/8 inch deep, 1/8 inch, and then I ripped pieces of wood and basically put some CA glue in the channel, hammered them in, and then taped around the edges. That allowed me to pour the epoxy. So I've got about an 1/8 of an inch of epoxy above the MDF. So if I cut into this table, it's not a problem. If I want to redo the design on the table, if I want to go back to cutting air ports, which I'm not going to, from now on, I'm just going to cut the grooves into the back of my templates. That way I can leave the surface perfectly flat, because sometimes I just tape down a piece of MDF and just have to cut out weird stuff, like if I need to make jigs for guitar building or temporary tools and fixtures. I don't have to worry about the air grooves. But one thing I learned is that by cutting all the air grooves in the table with all these designs, it was causing problems because I was very limited to where I could place certain templates based on the dowel placement. So there's a dowel right there. You'll see it underneath. This is one dowel for one of the 4 corners of the body blanks. And I'll show you, I created a master template for my workflow. Let me see if I can find this. Oh, I probably should have thought this one through. Layers, okay. Oh, hell, I'm not even gonna try with that. Let's see. All of these are vents, pipes, gaskets, threaded inserts, everything. And I have all these EPS files, so they're the main vacuum ports there. Let's see, new piping, get rid of that, get rid of that. All right, let's go up here and try to find these zones. Borders. Oh, no. That's not it. All right, so there's a zone right there. So this shows where I have, it's like a 14¼ by 20¼ blank. And it's indexed with dowels. So I always know that my bodies and tops are gonna be cut here. So they're all indexed. It's just a master template. And I'd encourage anybody to set up a master template who has a very specific workflow. I know it's hard sometimes because we get projects. I do a lot of cabinet doors, which throws me off sometimes. But that's why I leave the table flat, because I can put piping around the edge and put a whole sheet of cabinet grade or door grade or moisture resistant MDF, and it'll still hold it flat enough. So this is video 1. If anybody has questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm kind of shooting from the hip here. It's Thanksgiving. So, you know, I'll do my best to share this information with you and keep responding to messages if anybody has any questions. But yeah, this is the best way I could think of having a vacuum setup that could be repaired, patched, changed, everything. The trick is MDF with a thick pour of epoxy. Don't do it on your machine. I did because I've done this stuff a million times, but I would probably set this up off the machine. To make sure you can remove your spoil board, I cut these plugs out of MDF. I recessed the plug diameter into the MDF and I glued them in there with CA glue and an accelerator so that when I poured the epoxy, it wouldn't fall into the channels. Because guess what? I learned this for a reason. One screw had epoxy all in it. I had to chisel it out and hammer it out, and it was a friggin' mess. So this is the best way I've been able to come up with it. It works amazing. Again, I'll send you links if you need them or answer any questions. Thanks, guys. Happy Thanksgiving.